Okay, thank you very much. And thank you to Pierre and Shigeki for this wonderful Share Morley conference and for the invitation. So what I want to do in this lecture is to discuss a family of words and subshifts, the three subshifts. So it's a family of subshifts that contain at the same time Arnoux-Rosy words or shifts or interval exchanges. So I've studied this family with, in particular, Dominique Perrin, Julien Leroy in a series of papers. But here in the present work, I would like to concentrate on the orbit equivalence issues concerning these shifts, these words. And also, I will also consider the dimension group for these shifts. And it's a joint work with Paulina Cecchi, Francesco Dolce, Fabien Durand, Julien Leroy, Dominique Perrin, and Samuel Petit. So, yeah, we have a lot of co-authors because it's a long series of papers. But just to give a motivation, I will start with a question I've asked to Sébastien, for instance, Pierre, Pascal, several of you. So I've got a uniformly recurrent Arnoux-Rosy word, and I've got a coding of a three-interval exchange, and I take the same letter frequencies. And my question is, how can we compare them? So I take, for instance, the Fibonacci word, just au hasard, and I've got a vector of frequencies of letters given by the alpha, the root of the Fibonacci equation. So the frequencies of letters are respectively alpha, alpha square, alpha to the third, where the alpha is the root, the real root of this equation. And I take a three-interval exchange, the simplest one with permutation 3 to 1, with the length of the intervals given by alpha, alpha square, and alpha third. And my question is, are these objects, are these shifts related? So first question, are they topologically conjugate? Well, it's not difficult to see that they cannot be topologically conjugate. Just look at the argument of asymptotic pairs. I should maybe just make the remark that they both have the same factor complexity. So in terms of factors, these are both sequences of having factor complexity 2n plus 1. They are minimal, uniquely ergodic by Bocher-Nitzan's condition, complexity 2n plus 1. So it makes a sense of discuss letter frequencies, they exist. So I can consider this question for a uniformly recurrent Arnoux-Rosy word, a three-interval exchange with permutation 3 to 1, with the same letter frequencies. This question makes sense. So we can't have a topological conjugacy because of the combinatorics which is behind, by the argument of asymptotic pairs, such as developed by Thierry Coulbois in his lecture, for instance. Are they measured theoretically equivalent? So I asked the question to Sébastien, Pascal. So the answer of Pascal is generically not, but well, this is not a generic case. So is there a simple argument saying that these two objects are not measured theoretically equivalent? So for spectral reasons, we expect them not to be isomorphic. We have a discrete spectrum on one direction and weak mixing in the other case. But in this specific case, can we prove that they are not measured theoretically equivalent? Well, I must say that I haven't found a nice argument disproving that, but well, it's likely that they cannot be measured theoretically equivalent. But what I want to show here that they are related by a notion, a topological notion. So I will forget about measured theoretical isomorphism. I will concentrate on topological dynamics. And these objects are orbit equivalent. They are even strong orbit equivalent. So I will define what it means. But roughly speaking, it means that we can exchange via an homomorphism the orbits of each systems. So these systems are, in some sense, related via orbit equivalence. And I could ask the same question with Chacon. Chacon model, Chacon shift with complexity 2n plus 1. But then it would not be orbit equivalent with either of these systems. So we will need the notion of dimension group to be able to disprove the fact that we don't have orbit equivalence with Chacon. So we have a close relation between Arnoux-Rosie worlds exchange of intervals and a big difference with Chacon, and we will try to put the finger on what makes the difference, and the difference will be of a combinatorial nature. So this is what I will explain later. So I will start by recalling some facts about strong orbit equivalence, and recalling what is the dimension group. That is an invariant for this notion. Then I will introduce the family of infinite worlds I consider, tree shifts, defined in a combinatorial way with extension graphs. I will discuss return worlds for these families of worlds, and then I will show that we can easily compute the dimension groups for these tree shifts, which allows us to answer the questions I ask by comparing these types of shifts of infinite worlds through their dimension group. So I will start with first topological orbit equivalence. So that means that I am in a topological framework, I've got two topological dynamical systems, and I can exchange orbits with an homeomorphism. So this is what is expressed here. I can relate the orbits via this homeomorphism. So I've got my two topological dynamical systems. If I assume them to be minimal, then I can define uniquely a cocycle map which goes from one system to the other ones and which compares orbits. So a cocycle map is a map which goes from the first system to the set of integers and which allows to express the fact that the image of a point belongs to the orbit, that the orbits are exchanged. So we have two such maps starting from one set or the other one, two cocycle maps. And a stronger notion of orbit equivalence is the notion of strong orbit equivalence, which requires that these maps are very regular. Regular in this framework is continuity. So we allow them to have at most 1 point of discontinuity.
Which map?
Both the N and not the H map, the cocycle maps. The cocycle maps are very regular, have at most 1 point of discontinuity. If they are completely continuous, then you have you can flip the orbit, or you can send the orbit, or shift the orbit, or something very regular. And then that's the notion of strong orbit equivalence. And I consider this in a topological framework because we know from Dye's theorem that in a measure theoretic framework it makes no sense. Everybody is orbit equivalence up to sets of zero measure. So I'm really in a topological framework. So I come back to my initial question, my initial example I have in mind, the comparison between Arnoux-Rosie and interval exchanges. And then we know, complete invariance thanks to the work of Giordano, Pudman, and Sko. But I will just introduce this condition slowly. So we have a first characterization of orbit equivalence that we can phrase in nice dynamical terms, which is the following, that we have orbit equivalence if only if the set of measures on Klopen sets are the same. We have this nice characterization in case of uniquely ergodic systems. So if the measures of Klopen sets are the same, then we have orbit equivalence. So this nice condition. Well. And this is what allows us to say, very simply, that the Fibonacci shift and the interval exchange shift that we consider with the same, with the corresponding length for the intervals, are orbit equivalent. So what do we have to do? We have the same frequencies of letters. So what is hidden here? The fact that if you know the frequencies of letters and if you want to know the frequency of factors, then they're determined by the frequency of letters. We stay in the same group. That is to say, the measures of factors is Z of alpha, where alpha is the alpha we consider here, intersected with 0, 1. So that's a property shared by Arnoux, Rosie words and interval exchanges. This fails for Chacon or to Morse, for instance. We don't have this nice property of having letters which determine frequencies of factors. So that's what is hidden in this common combinatorial property that I want to develop here that makes that these systems are orbit equivalent. But if we want to speak about strong orbit equivalence, we need something more refined than just considering measures. We need the notion of dimension group. And to introduce the notion of dimension group, I just start with the notion of ordered group. And once we will have ordered group, we will go to dimension group. So an ordered group is just a group which is endowed with a notion of order, which is a positive cone. So that is to say, it's a group. So in abelian group, and then you add a notion of positive element, non-negative elements, and which fulfills what is given here, which is natural for a positive cone. Stability plus 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 is included in plus. You cannot be negative and positive at the same time, and by having plus and minus, you create everything. So that's typically the case of Z to the D with a positive cone N to the D. Well, it doesn't say much. And in our framework, if we take a shift, we have a natural ordered group we can consider, the set of continuous functions with values in Z, and the set of continuous functions with values in the set of non-negative integers. Okay, that's a notion. With this notion, we have a notion of order. We can say that an element is smaller than another one if the difference is positive. And it's compatible with the group structure which we have behind. And we have a further notion of order unit, which says that if you can be larger than any element by multiplying this unit by some suitable non-negative integer. So, with our example, we just take the vector equal to, with coordinates 1, 1, 1 for Z to the D, that's a unit, or you take the constant function equal to 1 for the set of continuous functions. Implicitly here, I use the compactness of my shift X to say that you can be above any kind of function if you take this constant function. So we have now examples of ordered group with a unital ordered groups. So we are very close to the definition of dimension group. So what is a dimension group?
What is the one?
So constant for continuous function or for the vector case?
So the first one, ZD and D.
The vector which only one coordinates 1. The vector which has 1, 1, 1, 1, yes. Although, yeah, we can also say that like that.
Because this is another group. I thought it was just a group and a cone.
Yes, so now I end of it with a unit. So an ordered group with unit, I need now as a notion my group, my cone, plus a unit. So I did some now I consider a triple group order hidden in the positive cone plus this notion of unit.
The unit is a unit for what operation? It's just a name?
No, it's a unit in this sense. It's a unit with respect to the order. When I said unit, I mean order unit. Not at all unit in algebraic sense. Order unit. Just something which allows to go to be larger than everybody. Exactly, exactly. So I should say order unit. But not unit in the sense of algebra.
You can take 2, 2, 2, 2, 2.
Yeah, exactly. You have a, yeah, that would work. You don't have unicity of the units. So maybe, well, It's not my choice of the terminology, but yeah, understand that unit might be confusing. And and in fact, the groups we will have will be simple, and every element of the cone will be a candidate for being a unit.
You just need to not to take something on the boundary.
Or something with negative, which is not in the boundary of the cone. So now a dimension group. So we have everything to understand what is a dimension group. It's just a direct limit of ordered groups. That we have seen, the simplest one, the one based on z to some power. And to make this direct limit, we just go from one stage to the other one by the action of a positive homomorphism. Just think of a non-negative matrix with integer coefficients. So that's the definition of Elliott. You have other characterization, but let's take this as a definition of a dimension group. So it's a direct limit of these simplest ordered groups that we have seen that were based on Z. And the direct limits, you can think of this of a union, in some sense, of all these elements of Z to the D with some consistence between the elements given by the product of matrices. It's also the same notion as the dimension of a matrix that is based on the individual range and of this matrix. So now that we have this definition, we would like to define such an object, to associate such an object to a shift. So how to do that? So we are given a shift, let's say a minimal shift. We have a lot of tools that are now well understood to decompose shifts. We have Kakutani-Rocklin-Towers, Bratelli-Vershik diagrams. So we can exhibit a Kakutani-Rocklin tower, and then we can decompose a shift in inverse limit. But then to go to a direct limit, we'll just have to take a continuous function. So let's think first how to decompose a shift. So we can decompose it as an inverse limit. That's the viewpoint developed by Hermann Tutmansko. We can decompose it in terms of return ones. So such as seen in the previous lecture, we have seen a return derived Voronoi decomposition. So we can decompose something in terms of return words. That's a viewpoint developed by Durand, Haus, and Sko. Or we can have the language of desubstitution and acidic sequences. We have all these ways of decomposing a shift. And once we can decompose a shift, then we would like to be able to have this kind of reduction with matrices going from one step to the other one. So if we just take continuous functions like that, we won't be able to decompose, to use on the set of continuous functions defined on my set X. We won't be able to see this decomposition that we have had via Rocklin towers or stuff like that. But if we take co-boundaries, if we take a space with respect to co-boundary, this set of continuous functions, then we are able to completely understand this decomposition in this way. So to be more specific, the matrices correspond to go from the values on each of the bases of the Rocklin tower. So we have a function which is constant on the levels of the Rocklin tower. We take the sum of the coordinates, and we have vectors going from one Rocklin tower to the other one. So once we go to this idea, taking co-boundaries, we are able to decompose the set of continuous functions up to co-boundaries like that, and we get a dimension group. So a dimension group is just, so it's also well known for people speaking the Czech cohomology language of decomposition of tiling spaces. So that's exactly the same idea. So we have our space X. We want to understand it. We have understood it like that with Bratelli-Vershik decomposition, Kakutani, Rocklin towers, and we want to understand it in a dual way via continuous functions. And up to co-boundaries, we can decompose it. We can understand, describe this dimension group like that. So to continue, or to rephrase what we've seen, what is the dimension group of a shift? So we have a notion of a dimension group. Now, given a shift, we can associate with a dimension group, the dimension group of a shift. So we will suppose it minimal. Well, we take this set of continuous functions quotiented by co-boundaries. We take the unit function, the function that takes constant value 1, and then we can define a dynamical dimension group with a unit. So that's the part we have seen, the part of continuous function, the positive cone, the unit, and when I take continuous functions up to co-boundaries. And then it's not that difficult to see that we get, this is a dimension group like as we've seen. We can decompose it as this inverse limit, as this direct limit with the matrices acting from levels of the Rockling towers or from levels of the Bratelli diagrams with the substitutions, with matrices playing the role we expect from level to level.
H plus, this is the set of equivalence class which
exactly.
One positive function.
Yeah, this is a set of equivalence classes of functions from X to the set of non-negative integers. So this is its classes. Yeah. So we have an object which is well defined, the dynamical dimension group, which has been studied, for instance, by Bernard Ross in the case of substitutions, and which is expressed in terms of the dimension group of the matrix of the substitution. So now, where are we? What can we do with that? Well, in fact, this object that we've seen gives you a complete invariant for the strong orbit equivalence. So two systems XS, two minimal contour systems, or two minimal shifts, are a strong orbit equivalent if only if their dimension groups are isomorphic, with an isomorphism which preserves all what we've seen, isomorphism for the group structure, but which preserves the positive cone and the unit. So we have something which go a bit farther than the notion of orbit equivalence, which involves all these objects. And if we want to come back just to orbit equivalence, so strong orbit equivalence is we have this restriction on the discontinuity points. Orbit equivalence says nothing about the map that intertwines the orbits. So for orbit equivalence, well, to express it in a similar way, we just have to consider this set, the set of classes of functions for which the integral is equal to 0 for all measures which are invariant. And then we will rephrase the characterization we've seen from Giordano, Pudman, and Sko that said orbit equivalence can be characterized to the fact that the measures, when we are uniquely ergodic, give the same set of values to Klopen sets. So in fact, the orbit equivalence can be characterized like that. You take your dimension group, and you now quotient, so you have quotiented by co-boundaries. Now you take a further quotientation. You take the quotient via the subgroup of infinitesimals. So the functions which have zero a mean with respect to our measure. And if these two groups are equivalent, we have orbit equivalence. So we can say that orbit equivalence can be understood by understanding the measures, and strong orbit equivalence is more demanding because it requires to really understand the algebraic part, the group part of our groups. Here, in some way, we have killed the group part in the orbit equivalence notion via the fact that we have taken a quotient via infinitesimals. So if we come back to our initial question, the Fibonacci shift and the interval exchange example. For the Fibonacci shift, I don't know whether you will be surprised or not, but I wanted to say that you might not be surprised by the fact that the group part is just z to the 3. You have no extrapolation which occurs So we will try to understand why, but for instance, if you think in terms of tumors, then you would have the set of dyadic rationals and not Z to the 3, some kind of independence, which comes from the fact that we have several reasons behind, but unimodularity, which is behind, or algebraicity. So for the Freire-Bonacci shift, the group part is just Z to the 3. The positive part, well, we have to find a cone, and could be more natural to have a cone than taking something given by the letter frequencies. So the positive cone is just the vector whose scalar product is by the vector alpha, alpha square, alpha to the 3rd, whose scalar product is positive, plus the unit that we choose here. So that's the dimension group of the Fibonacci shift. And it's the same than the dimension group of the interval exchange we had in mind. So both shifts are strong equivalent, strong orbit equivalent. They are not only orbit equivalent, but they have the same group part. So what I would like now to do is to extend this to my family of words I've mentioned before, the 3 shifts. And we'll try to see where this property comes from, the fact that they have the same group part. So for my family of shifts I will define, they all have in the algebraic part Z to the cardinality of the alphabet. The property we will see is the property that makes that for the continuous function you have quotiented by co-boundaries, you have no group, extra group condition that is involved. This idea I try to summarize by letters determine frequencies of letters, determine frequencies of factors. For people working in Rosy graphs, the Rosy graph associated with Sturmian word or with an Arnoux-Rosy word is such that algebraically, the set of paths of the Rosy graph, if you look at it as an algebraic object, so it generates the free group. So, yeah.
Well, do you know the properties of the interaction transformation with this length? I mean, is it...
No, I still don't know whether it has discrete spectrum or not. I expect not. This is why I asked to several of you. So I still don't know that the spectrum is not that we don't have a discrete spectrum. That is not a rotation and that it's generic. It's a weakly mixing for this specific example. So I don't know whether someone is able to, for this specific example, to prove. So by discussing with Pierre, it's not substitutive because it has a cubic parameter, and if it were substitutive on 3 letters, it would be quadratic. So, well, these are things I can say. But this simple question of measure theoretic isomorphism on this specific example, I have no idea of disproving, which this is what I expect, of disproving measure theoretic isomorphism. All I can say is. Mentioning topological properties like orbit equivalence and strong orbit equivalence. So now I will introduce my family of 3 shifts, and I would like to thank Milton and Thierry, because so this family of 3 shifts, we will see that the notion of 3 has nothing to do with the fact that there could be subshifts defined on trees. So we are totally aware of that our terminology might be confusing. Our 3 shifts are families of words, infinite words, not families of, it's not a dynamics on trees. But thanks to Milton and Thierry, we can now have an argument for the terminology 3 shifts because there are trees hidden behind, because we are in a para-geometric automorphism world, and you know now that there are trees behind. So what are 3 shifts? So it's a family of words that we will introduce from the viewpoint of word combinatorics. We will extend it, of course, we will see that it yields ergodic properties. We will be able with the definition which is combinatorics to have more information. And what is interesting is that we have a lot of algebraic information thanks to this combinatorial property. I will explain a few of these algebraic properties, but we find a lot of them. And a motivation is to see the common framework between Arnold-Rossi words and interval exchanges that are so different from spectral reasons or for Diophantine properties. But here we find a common features. We want to understand the role played by free groups in this, not only the free monoid, but really free groups. And also we would like to see, and that's maybe the story Julien will explain in his lecture, that starting with this notion, Julien was able to define a a continuous fraction algorithm, very interesting. And the tool we will use is a property of written words and SIDic expansions. So just to give the definition is purely combinatorial and it's very simple. It's a definition based on properties of extension of factors. So I've got a factor, W, of my infinite word, and I look at the left extensions, the right extensions, and the two-sided extensions. And I will introduce a graph, very simple, which says, for any factor W, I put an arrow between two letters if the word W prolongated on the left by this letter and if the word ALWB1 exists in the language. So I put an arrow between two letters if the word that contains W exists in the language. So it's a graph. For each factor, I've got my graph. On the left, I put all my left extensions. On the right, my right extensions. So it has a meaning only if I've got a B-special word. And I put arrows if this combination of letters exists in the word A2, W, BR. So that's a graph. I do that for every word. And that's my condition. Well, my condition, I haven't phrased it. So my condition is the following. So I just now sketch the graph like that. I forget about the W in the middle. I just think of left letters, right extensions. And the condition is that we have a tree word if only if, well, that's the definition. We have a tree word if for any factor of the language, this graph that we have seen is acyclic and connected. It's a tree. So the terminology tree comes from this extension graph. So we will see visually that that's the case for, well, Arnold-Rossi, it's easy to figure out for interval exchange. So that's the common feature of these objects, but we have more possibilities.
Could you come back to the...
Yeah.
How can we have a cycle?
Oh, okay, I will, thank you for asking.
Okay, sorry.
No, thank you. So the case of the two Morse word shows that you can have a cycle. If you have too much words, in fact, even think of the empty word. If you have AA, AB, BA, BB, just if you have this, start with W equals empty word. If you have the four factors of length 2, well, I've got a cycle. Thank you. So yeah. So I want this. So that means you have no strong special factor. All your special factors are neutral. They are even ordinary. And by the way, I would like to stress the fact that Gilles Didier here has studied a family, a similar condition with neutrality. So we are more...
But in fact, Dominique Perrin and Dominique Lemotot just finished a paper.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Because you could also make a generalization of this, not asking this condition for the empty word. So we call them three words with characteristic. But so we ask this to be to all for any factor. And this condition for any factor is the condition that allows us to say that frequencies of letters will propagate to frequencies of factors, and that will give orbit equivalence for this family of words. This is this property that will allow to say that all the rosy graphs generate the free group. This is this kind of independence that is hidden in this simple property here, not to have a cycle and to be connected. The algebra, the free group property is really in this property. So just to be sure that our class is not empty, I won't prove it for every length, but so as a warm-up, the Fibonacci word is a three word, so we look at the first factors and so on and so forth. So that's my class. It's defined in a...
There are always very small graphs, at most 2D vertices.
Yeah, so you mean in terms of factor complexity?
Yeah, I was thinking about in terms of rosy graph, but no, this is very small.
Small in terms...
There are only twice the alphabet.
What do you mean by twice the alphabet? What is twice the alphabet?
Any one of these graphs,
Yes.
this is just the vertices. Any letter occurs at most twice. The vertices are letters and they occur twice.
Yes.
I was expecting something wrong.
No. These graphs are small in terms of you have the alphabet on the left at most and the alphabet on the right. These are simple graphs. When I mention rosy graphs, this is not the same graphs, but these graphs govern the evolution of the rosy graphs. And they say a lot of the evolution of rosy graphs. And then, so these words have linear factor complexity, chi minus n plus 1 factors of length n. It's very simple. It's not difficult to prove it via this property of extension of factors. B-special factors are neutral. So you have Arnoux-Rosy words, you have codings of interval exchanges, and you have the famous Cassaigne-Selmer substitutions. Which provide an arithmetic generalization, an arithmetic viewpoint, codics of interval exchanges. It's by the geometry that we will see that there are three words, and Arnoux-Rosy words, it's by definition that there are three words with the fact that there is only one factor which has several branching on the right and the left. So we have these families of words, but we have a lot of other possibilities. It's not reduced to this, but it allows to capture the common feature between these families of words. So just to convince you, I hope that interval exchanges are three words. So I've taken an interval exchange on 4 letters here, and to see whether, so I start with the empty word once again, to see whether P can be followed by a letter. I just look at where my interval labeled by P falls with respect to the other intervals. It falls below RBP. I've got a rose. And then if I want to see what are the extra, the other rows, I just look at who falls below whom, and you see that you will have something connected and with no cycle. So that's for the empty word. So then if I continue, B is below P, G is below P, and R is below P and G. So you can put the extra arrows and you have something which has no cycle, which is planar. And this is what Sébastien described in his paper with Luca Zamboni on the combinatorics of interval exchanges. When I say frequencies determine frequencies of factors, that's exactly what is described by Sébastien, and that's the reformulation of the description of Sébastien and Luca for interval exchanges. And here, for any factor, it's just you have a planar graph for any factor W. You can associate with possible right extensions the corresponding intervals which code these factors, and you can see you have a path between intervals of left extensions and intervals of corresponding to these right extensions. So the case of interval exchange is even simpler. It's a planar graph, and here I illustrate this in the case that if you wait long enough, you have only one interval that overlaps to other intervals. Okay, so I don't know whether you're convinced, but interval exchanges produce three words. So now what is the property we will use for three words? 3 shifts, 3 languages, 3 sets, we will use the fact that the written words, for any factor, the set of written words has the same cardinality and forms a basis of the free group. And then that's the main property, and with this property we can derive everything we want from a dynamical viewpoint. So to define a written word, it's just a word between 2 successive occurrences of a given word. So we take a word which is uniformly recurrent. Words occur with bounded gaps. So a written word to W is a word V such that WV ends with W and contains exactly 2 occurrences of W. So in the case of the Fibonacci word, I've taken the written words to A. We could put bars, I put bars after each occurrence of A. We can decompose the Fibonacci word like that. And we see, and it's well known, that for Sturmian words, on 2 letters, there are only 2 written words, not only for letters, but for any words. So this is a property we will have for all our class. Whatever the word you take, there will be as many written words as the cardinality of the alphabet. So for in Sturmian words or for interval exchanges, this is something understood thanks to the geometry, but here we can do it thanks to the combinatorial data that we have. This idea of extension graph can be translated in terms of written words. With this property, we stay on this same alphabet. So if we think in terms of Kakutoni-Rocklin Tower or Bratelli-Verschig decomposition, we will be of bounded rank. We will have always the same number of vertices, so that's very convenient. Sorry, Sebastian. And also we have this extra property, which is maybe not of a dynamical nature a priori, but we will see that we can use it. It's that, moreover, the written words make for every fixed word, you look at its written words, and it's the basis of the free group, which is a very nice property. You can prove it for interval exchanges using the surface, which the geometry which is behind, but you can also do it completely combinatorially for these 3 words. Okay, so we have these written words. So we start on the same alphabet, we have written words, we can associate with them substitution, we have everything we need to decompose or shift.
For each
Every word, every factor, the set of written words to this factor in the language forms the basis of the free group. So it's not only that the matrix is invertible, but it's really algebraic. So I've asked you once the question for interval exchanges. For you it was clear because of the group, the geometric vision, but it's a property that you can reach just with this combinatorial characterization. So now we have written words, so that's the result. We can use written words, and also I forgot to say that if we decompose in the derived sequence, so you've seen the notion of derived sequence in the previous lecture, the decoding of 3 words is again a uniformly recurrent word, but the nice property, it's again a 3 word. So we can decompose. So we can start from the first letter, say, take the coding with respect to the written words of this first letter, get a new 3 word, so we can decompose. So we are very happy, we have a renormalization process, we have a continued fraction algorithm, we have a decomposition with these written words, and what is comfortable is that we stay on an alphabet of same cardinality. We do not explode the cardinality of the alphabet when we do this process. So we know that we are SID words where the substitutions involved are positive automorphisms of the free group. So well, that's an information. And we know that the acidic representation makes sense. It's a primitive one. It's not any of the acidic representation like Julien knows how to do, which are maybe not relevant. I haven't said unuseful representations, but okay, so we have a primitive representation, a primitive in the sense that if you wait at each step, if you wait long enough, you create a positive matrix. So you have an acidic representation, so that means that you have your decomposition in Kakutani-Rocklin towers or Brateli-Vershik diagrams. I will come to this later to say more, but you have any kind of representation you like. And just a small remark, it's not obvious that if you use only elementary positive automorphisms, you create linear complexity. You stay within zero entropy because primitivity plus a finite number of substitutions lets you stay within zero entropy. But PTAS-Fogg is able to construct examples of sequences generated by positive elementary automorphisms with high factor complexity among zero entropy. Why do I make this parenthesis? It's because you could think, okay, they play the role of the Sturmian substitutions, which are known to be the invertible substitutions on the two-letter alphabet. So we could say, okay, let's take any composition of such automorphisms. Do they all correspond to 3 words? No, 3 words or linear complexity words are a subfamily of what you can get by composing such elementary automorphisms. So it's not enough to say that you take this acidic system, you have more restrictions. Okay, so now we can arrive to the question of orbit equivalence for 3 shifts. So just to recap, for orbit equivalence and strong orbit equivalence, we would like to compute the dimension group. So the dimension group, this is exactly the same slide. So these are the continuous functions modulo the coboundaries, and we want to understand these continued functions modulo the coboundaries. So remember, it's also recap, that strong orbit equivalence is characterized by this dimension group, and orbit equivalence by this dimension group quotiented by the infinitesimal subgroup. But here we are in a nice unique ergodic case if we are on a 3-letter alphabet, say. We are not necessarily uniquely ergodic. Some interval exchanges are not, of course, uniquely ergodic, but let's consider some cases of unique ergodicity. So we have a further group, ordered group, that we can associate with a dimension group, the dimension group of a shift. It's the group seen through the invariant measures, that is to say, this set of values, all the integrals of continuous functions via the invariant measures. So that makes a new ordered group with unit, the image subgroup of the dimension group. So that's a group, an ordered group, once again, these times included in R. We have the infinitesimal subgroup, the one which is useful to describe orbit equivalence via Giordano-Pudman and Sco result. And then we have something comfortable in case of unique ergodicity. It's that this group that gives you the characterization of orbit equivalence is nothing else than the image subgroup. And the image subgroup is just, in fact, the additive group generated by frequencies of factors. I use implicitly the result that say that if you have the integral of some function with respect to a measure, there exists a Klopen set that realizes this. So I can make this game of considering integrals of functions and measures of Klopen sets, and then going to the additive group generated by measures of cylinders. So phrased like that, I mean, from a combinatorial viewpoint, we are more, I feel personally more comfortable. And then the question of understanding the dimension group is just relies on understanding the frequencies of factors. And the idea I stress since the beginning is that frequencies of factors correspond to frequencies of letters. That is to say, the additive group generated by the frequencies, the measures of cylinders, is nothing else than the additive group generated by measures of letters. Everything is given by the measures of letters from an additive group viewpoint. So, having said that, I can now give all my theorems, which is the following. This group I, the image group, is just for a tree-shift. We will assume it uniquely ergodic and minimal. Uniquely ergodic just not to have to play with all invariant measures. So in the case of uniquely ergodic and minimal tree shift, then the image group is just the additive group generated by the frequencies of letters. And the proof is really in this sentence that I tried to phrase from the beginning. Frequencies of letters determine frequencies of factors. If you have in mind a rosy graph vision, the frequencies from one evolution to the next evolution propagate on the branches of the graphs, and they propagate thanks to this extension graph, which allows to propagate the information. So it's definitely not the case as in tumors, for instance, where the frequencies of letters are in z of 1/2, well, are the z of 1/2, but have 1/2, then for factors of length 2, 1/4, and so on and so forth, for Chacon.
The consequence of the fact that the matrices are determinant 1, or do you need more?
I need more. Yes, it's not because you have a unimodular static system, for instance. It's really the algebra. It's not only linear. When you say me matrices have determinant 1, you have linearized the problem. I really need the algebra which is behind, or the combinatorics, which is that my graph is this property on my graph. So it's this is what I call an algebraic property. It's not just arithmetic property like a unimodularity of the matrices. So I really propagate, and the proof of this fact is really by induction propagation. If I know that the frequencies, the measure of my cylinders of size n belong to this group generated by the frequencies of letters, from n to n plus 1, by induction I use just my properties, my graph properties. So it's a graph combinatorial proof for this result. So far I haven't, it's just a graph property. So another way of formulating this is that if I've got now two invariant measures, so the same proof allows us to say that if you have two invariant measures, if they coincide on letters, they coincide on every factor. The same property as for interval exchanges. So we have this is not specific to interval exchanges. This is another way of phrasing frequencies of letters determine everything. So now let's go to the dimension group. So it's not only about frequencies. Dimension group, remember, it's this set of continuous functions via modulo coboundaries, positive cone and unit. And then the common feature of all this is that this algebraic structure now can be read on the group part. For all this dimension group, the group part is z to the cardinality of the alphabet. Okay, and then if we have unique ergodicity and rational independence of the letter frequencies, then we can even express the positive cone as something which is natural. We have met before. These are the vectors whose scalar product with the frequency vector is non-negative. And so for the proof, what is the idea of the proof? I will not detail it, but it's really this property on the written words. So you have this decomposition in terms of written words. The matrices are unimodular. So now we can use, for the algebraic part, the fact that the matrices are unimodular. For the algebraic part, this is what we can use. So it's a question of product of matrices, and it resembles the computation you can find for dimension group in many cases. So you have always this question of unique ergodicity, the cone, the matrices, which converts to unique vector, stuff like that. For the positive part, it's really the similar as Perron-Frobenius type, generalized Perron-Frobenius type argument. So we use the description by written words. But another way, so there are several possibilities. You can play with rosy graphs, you can play with written words, you can play with Rocking Towers. There are a lot of ways of looking at this. And just here, I stress the fact that this property that I mentioned, the group described by the rosy graph is the free group for every step. Is also another way of seeing that you can describe your dimension group via cycles that you see in the rosy graph. The cohomology can be seen better with this viewpoint. And this is what makes the ZD part comes from. If you have in mind a rosy graph for an Arnoux-Rosy case, one understands well that if you want to associate an algebraic object to this, to the branch, the cycles you make, it's Z to the D. You have no dependence on the algebraic branches. I'm sorry, I have ruined twice the batteries. So just to rephrase it, if you take three shifts that are minimal and uniquely ergodic with the same additive group of letter frequencies, then they are orbit equivalent. If, moreover, the letter frequencies are rationally independent, you are not only orbit equivalent, but you are strong orbit equivalent. So if you are on a three-letter alphabet, you have for free that you are uniquely ergodic by Boschanitz-Hans result. So you know that all minimal three shifts on a three-letter alphabet that have the same frequencies of letters are orbit equivalent. In particular, the example of the beginning, I take an exchange of three intervals, an IDOC1, three-letter Arnoux-Rosy subshift, or I even take a two-dimensional Sturmian shift, because I could also mention orbit equivalence for mix Z action and a Z square action. And for all these objects, as Pierre can know as well, you were just looking at things like that. This is the description of the orbits which are behind. So Pierre is not surprised by this result because for him, an Arnoux-Rosy word is an exchange of intervals given with these parameters. So in some sense, arithmetically, the orbits we are playing with are the same. But there is no reason for any tree subshift to have this nice property. Well, also we have this result that we can compare from an orbit viewpoint all these objects. And I would like just to end by also mentioning some nice property of these three shifts that we get thanks to the fact that the substitution which are behind the written words are invertible. So that gives us, with a result with Wolfgang Steiner and Rimi Yassawi, a recognizability property. So when I said we can speak of Kakutani, Rocking Towers, Bratelli diagrams, or written word, or SADIC, it makes sense because we have recognizability of all these involved substitutions. What I mean by recognizability, I'm not just focusing on recognizability in the shift of a substitution. I just want to consider recognizability with respect to different languages. So I've got substitutions. They are maybe not on the same alphabet. In our case, it is the case, but even if they are not on the same alphabet, I can have a notion of recognizability, saying that I want to be able to decompose in a unique way, to desubstitute in a unique way, every sequence on the alphabet B, if my substitution is from A to B, in a unique way, up to some shift. So that's recognizability in this sense. We can think of recognizability for SADIC framework. We have a sequence of morphisms. For each, we have a sequence of shifts that correspond to starting the decomposition from some level on. And then we can say that a sequence is recognizable if sigma is recognizable for every stage from each level to each level. And then what is nice is that with this property that our written words form basis of the free group, we have recognizability. I'm really sorry, Jörg. So Jörg is of course co-author. since I always make confusion between Jörg and Wolfgang, I suppose I've put you in one person, so I'm very sorry. So it's joint work with Wolfgang Steiner, Jörg Tiswallner, and Remy Assaoui. And then we have recognizability. And then we have, if you prefer the language of Bratelli-Verschick system for understanding these systems, it works perfectly well. Also the substitutions are proper. And so now we can, speaking in terms of topological conjugacy, we can describe them with respect to their Bratelli-Verschick description. And we have a bounded rank, bounded by the size of the alphabet. So just to conclude, so for these three shifts, there are numerous properties. So I would like to stress that they have linear factor complexity, that we can decompose them via return words, that we get this property of having basis of the free group for return words. So we get acidic generations, continued fraction algorithms, we have recognizability. So we know now well how to describe orbit equivalence via letter frequencies. So there are other results I haven't developed here, is that we have a property of codes bifix code that we can have within the languages generated by these shifts. For instance, we can realize any subgroup of finite index of the free group. We can provide him with a positive basis contained in a tree language, positive basis with, positive powers of letters contained, given in a tree languages. You give me your favorite exchange of intervals, I can realize I can give a basis of any subgroups of the free group of finite index, and I can give a basis whose elements are described by elements of the language of my interval exchange. And I will conclude with some questions concerning the geometrical representation of this object. The question is the following. Arnoux-Rosy words are known to have an interpretation also as interval exchange you have 6 interval exchange. So is it possible to use the parageometric description of developed by Thierry Coulbois, Martin Lustig, Arnaud Elion, and so on and so forth, and developed by Milton and Coulbois in their lectures. So it seems that there is a connection between this property tree shift and parageometry. So can we use the real, so now you know that with a parageometric substitution you have a real tree. It seems that you can have an interval exchange given on the contour substitution via this real tree. So is it possible to describe every tree subshift via this exchange of intervals that you can find through this real tree? So that's the question now I ask. I would like to have not only an algebraic, not only a combinatorial framework for these objects, but now a geometric one. How can one realize them in a geometric way? Is there a common approach, a geometric approach on these objects? Well, thank you very much.